Today I'm talking about three 1953 French films and the very Americanized versions of their titles are Mr. Hulot's Holiday, The Wages of Fear, and The Earrings of Mrs. ... Apostrophes, Les Vacations de Monsieur Hulot, or Mr. Hulot's Holiday. This is a 1953 comedy, and it's practically a silent film. It's about Mr. Hulot going on a holiday, and hijinks ensue. This character is a strong inspiration for Mr. Bean, so if you've seen any Mr. Bean sketch, it's the same sort of vibe. I'm also fairly certain it's one of the original inspirations for the National Lampoon Vacation films, this and that one Jimmy Stewart movie I watched. But what's so interesting about this movie is that I've already seen the sequel. It's called My Uncle. I watched that 3 years ago now, and I hated that movie. Like, I up and down could not stand that movie at all. It just didn't work for me. None of the jokes landed, I found it boring and uninteresting, and I couldn't stand it. It was terrible. But the original, this one, I freaking loved. I had a big old smile on my face. The entire movie, essentially every joke worked for me. And there were so many times I'd just be like, that was so smart and hilarious. And like so many of the jokes too, practically all of the jokes would go in a way that I didn't see coming at all. Like, yeah, there were definitely like the obvious jokes of like, oh, he's holding a thing backwards, he's gonna knock something over, and he does. But most of the time it's just like, wow, I did not think it was gonna go this way, and that is amazing. So it's so crazy to me that the first one I love and the second one I hate, when from what I can gather, the sequel is kind of regarded as like the big classic. Like, I think the original is still loved, but I think the sequel is more highly loved, whereas I didn't care for the sequel at all. So yeah, that's just an interesting thing. Anyway, I totally recommend this movie. It's amazing. I loved it so much. I would totally even recommend this to my parents. If you're not into foreign films, you can still do it. There's hardly any dialogue. You can do it. It's a delightful comedy. I love it so much. All right, yes. Next up is The Wages of Fear. This is a 1953 French/Italian film. It has like a dozen languages in it. It's ridiculous. And the basic premise is this is a metaphor for the pitfalls of capitalism, if you couldn't tell by the title. But the actual plot is about this small rural town in somewhere South America, maybe? And it's very, very poor. There's no jobs. Everyone wants to work, but there's nothing to do. Until one day, this American oil company is like, hey, I need a group of people to do some very dangerous stuff. Does anyone want to do it? And everyone's like, yes. So a group of people do some dangerous stuff, and it's dangerous. So I started this movie, and I wasn't really vibing with it. It was okay. I don't know. It wasn't working the best for me. I don't know exactly what it was. But once we got into like the meat and potatoes of the movie, the second act, where they start to do the road trippy part of the movie, it got me. It just worked for me. It worked really, really well for me, honestly. Like, the tension was there the entire time. Like, it could just be like someone's just doing like fiddling with a thing, but like there's kind of like a ticking time bomb in the back at all times. And so it's like, even though he's just fiddling, it's intense. It's so intense. And it works really well. And like all of the trials they kind of go through on the journey just are really smart trials, and they're really interesting, and it was great. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie, and I especially love how it ended. It was a really solid ending, but it was that first act that didn't quite work for me. There was just a long time for setup, setting up the characters and the town and stuff, and I really feel like we didn't need that much time. But even with that, I still really liked this movie, so I would still totally recommend it. And even if like you were like me and like you're not vibing with it right away, I would say try to stick it out, because I think you'll again be like me and really start to get into it once they hit the road. So yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. And lastly is The Earrings of Madame de... And that's it. First off, I don't like the title of this movie. I don't really like that whole joke, because it's like they don't say the last name and it's a whole literary thing. But also the title doesn't work in English, because the D doesn't translate, because the D generally is like an apostrophe S. But because they translated everything except for the last little bit, it doesn't work. It really should be what I said at the beginning, where it's the earrings of Mrs. ... rather than the earrings of Madame de ... I don't know, it's whatever, it's fine. I'm trying to sound friends and fancy. Spoilers, I didn't really care for this movie. The basic premise is this married woman really likes to flirt with the boys, but then one day she meets a handsome man who she maybe wants to leave her husband for, but she's conflicted. There's also this whole convoluted thing with this set of earrings that keeps going from person to person, and it's really central to stuff. I did find parts of this movie interesting. Some of the moral dilemma. What I didn't really care for was the main character. I really didn't like her and couldn't stand her. The two men that are in the movie, the husband and the love interest, were interesting, but like the husband was just a giant asshole. Like he did do some good stuff, but it's kind of just like, why are these two people still together? They shouldn't be together. I get it's like the 1880s or something, but that really doesn't feel like a good excuse for why these two people are still together. Like they should be of an understanding that they can, you know, do extramarital affairs or something, because it's just two miserable people together making each other more miserable. And that's just not fun to watch. And it's also just like her very intentionally cheating and hurting. And it's just, I don't know. I really didn't care for it. It was interesting-ish and filmed well, but it was not for me. And so I don't recommend it. Alrighty, now for today's rankings. First up, we got Monsieur Hulot Holiday sitting at number 3 in the really like section, and it's probably gonna stay within like the top 20 for sure of this year. I can definitely tell. And then after that is The Wages of Fear sitting at number 6. Also in the really liked category. And then bringing up the rear, rightfully so, as my first meh of the year, The Earrings of Madame de, sitting at number 17 in the meh category. And this is out of a total of 18 old movies so far this year.